Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your time and for attending today this presentation of the third quarter 2021 quarterly activities report webinar for Clean Tech Water. Presenting today will be Willem Vriesendorp, the CEO, and we'll be having some question time at the end. So I'll hand it over to Willem to take you through the quarterly and ongoing activities. Thanks, Willem.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, welcome everybody. As Peter mentioned, I will be discussing our last quarter. You can find much of this information in our quarterly activities report and our 4C. So last quarter was obviously an important quarter because it was also our first quarter as an independent company, which started on the 2nd of July. So that's obviously a milestone for us in our history, the first to be precise. So then if you look at cash, we had good receipts, 1.6 million, which is quite a growth from the previous quarters. Our cash use was 2 million, which included some one-offs and included some prepayments we did for new projects. That's unusual. We usually don't do that, but there was a lot of urgencies in some of our new projects, so we decided to do that. And that's now in this quarter will be sort of paid from the receipts we get from customers, which meant by the end of the last quarter, we had around 14 million in cash in our company. Operationally, our quarter was very, very good because we signed 2 new contracts, a total value of 5 million, bringing our total to 30 million. So we are seeing the growth we were aiming for very much materializing already. Secondly, importantly, Nematia is doing very well. So we're making a lot of progress. As I've mentioned in previous presentations, we are very much aiming to get our graphene membranes on the market soon because there's a lot of demand for membranes, and we believe our membranes provide a substantial improvement to all the existing membranes that are currently being used. So we're focusing a lot on making progress there. And then I will later in this presentation have a little bit more background about our pipeline of opportunities that also continues to strengthen. And we also strengthened our board with the addition of Robin McLeod, who has a strong background in water. So we're also trying to create a very strong board that also has strong connections into the water sector. So then some more backgrounds. This is the cash receipts. So you do see the trend. Before June, it's obviously part of Sunrise, so we were part of the bigger company, but these are our revenues during that time, which was obviously still lower. So now you see the revenues or the cash income picking up on the back of the signed contracts we have. This is perhaps even a stronger picture or a clearer picture where you really see the growth. So, and this again puts it a little bit better in context, perhaps for us as a company. So in around 2007, we really reoriented our water portfolio. We added some further technologies to our portfolio and started to focus very much on really selling our integrated solutions, really getting revenues from selling integrated solutions. And then after these 3 first projects, which were sold in a commercial environment, but we also saw a bit as our first demonstration projects since a very long time, we didn't build up our sales team yet, or we didn't build up our commercial team because we first wanted to make sure these projects were up and running and could be shown to new customers and were successful. So once that started to happen in 2020, did we start to build up our commercial team. And the result of that buildup, you can see from this picture, is now showing very clearly in the new contracts we've been signing and the revenues we've been generating. So we expect and hope to continue this growth. Of course, our team is still growing slowly. And also importantly, every time we deliver a project, especially when the project is in a new region, so examples are now in the Middle East and in China, in Ordos, every time that happens, you see follow-up demand. So you see more requests coming in. We have more ability to show to potential customers the plant, they can visit it. So that's how we see this growth to continue to accelerate. Then let me see. This is a little bit more, as I said, a little bit more background or details on our pipeline of opportunities. just to be clear, right, these leads and opportunities is a bit of a judgment on when you call them a lead or when you don't, right? We have internal processes to manage that. But I think it's especially encouraging the picture on the left. So you see the split of our opportunity funnel across the technologies. So you see two things there. One is you see a very well distributed split, which is, again, very encouraging. And the second thing you see is that our opportunities are very much built around our unique technologies. So each of these technologies is very unique, is almost unique in the world. So what we do there is for these customers, we provide a solution that's different from others, that often solves problems that other technologies cannot yet solve, or because they're simply more economical. So the only thing in there is obviously other and batch. So other is other, so that could be sort of more general opportunities that we pursue for strategic reasons, or it could be batch, which might or might not be completely based on some of our unique know-how, or maybe a little bit more similar to general batch. But the far majority of the opportunities we're pursuing are built on our unique technologies. So that also, again, it confirms very much that we're a technology company that grows and looks to continue to grow in the future, building on our portfolio of solutions. To the next. So a little bit more background on the two signed contracts that we signed in the past quarter. So one is our HYROX solution that was sold in the Middle East. So we sold it to Nesser, which is our partner there, and it's going to be used by a multinational oil and gas company to treat bore water. And the big difference, the benefits we brought with our HYROX process here was that a massive reduction in the amount of bore water you need to pump up to produce a certain amount of water that they actually reuse to re-inject. So a strong, much more environmental friendly. And the second thing we did, or we are doing in this process, is we're reusing some of the brine. So the bore water has salt in it, and they actually need salt for re-injection. So we recycle that. So both we have a much lower footprint with water, and we also have a much lower footprint with chemical use. And this sector is obviously very big because the oil and gas sector will remain very large for the foreseeable future, while it has a very, very strong focus of reducing their environmental footprint, both water and energy. And we help with that through our HYROX solution. The second new contract of the last quarter was our first EVAPX contract outside of China. And it's again, so it's interesting, these two contracts were both strongly driven by reducing environmental footprint. And although that's always been a factor, I think recently you see sort of the importance of factors flipping. It was always economics first and then environmental benefits second. But with both contracts, you almost saw the opposite dynamic. It is environmental benefits first, especially also carbon footprint first. And then secondly, it has to make economic sense, of course. So the second one was a little bit similar as the first, as the one on the left, in that water reuse, but also the ability to reuse the brine in the process. So both then reducing the water footprint, the energy footprint, and the chemical footprint. And then something on our graphene membranes. So as most of you will know, we manage that in a separate company. That's Nematia, 100% owned by CleanTech Water. So in the last quarter, we produced several hundred meters of our graphene coated materials. These are our graphene membranes. And we were able to produce that at very low cost because it's basically a printing facility that can print those sheets of membranes. We did testing on the membranes. It looks very good. It meets the specifications for things like robustness, flux, and rejection, which then also means that it has this much lower energy use than the alternative that's available in the market currently. And what we're now doing, and also very much in the next quarter have as a plan to do, is we're incorporating these flat sheets into modules. These are existing modules, so that will, once we become commercial, facilitate the speed to go to market, because you can basically put them in existing well-specified modules. You see a module on the right. So we were going to do the test in modules. We're also going to create larger sheets, because for industrial applications, you typically have larger sheets. So that's the thing we're working on currently. And then obviously we want to do pilots. So the pilots then do the final step in the demonstration to the market, to our potential customers, to ourselves, which will then be the final step towards commercialization. So then that sort of concludes the update of the last quarter. And just to end then with 2 slides on our, put it back into the context of our strategy. So the last quarter, again, is a confirmation and further expansion of our strategy. You very much see that our focus to build our growth and build our company on a unique set of innovative solutions and technologies is working, is growing. And we're going to add new technologies to it, like you see for Nematic. And then with those technologies and with those solutions, we're looking to enter some of the large growth sectors. And by doing that, we see this enormous potential demand that we plan to materialize over the next quarter. And then final, these are our markets. So some of you might know these slides, right? These are very large markets for which we've developed and further sort of developed these technologies that we have in our portfolio. And you also see that the new projects and the projects we're currently working on very much align with this sector focus. So we are now working on 3 projects in industrial brine, 2 projects in municipal effluent reuse, and 1 in mining. And then the outlook for the next quarter, there's obviously a lot of things we're working on, but a few things perhaps to highlight. While we are working on or having a lot of discussion with potential customers, we're also still doing pilots, and pilots tend to be one of the better indicators for a project being coming soon. So we have some very promising pilots in China, Europe, and in Australia. We're also going to do planning to do our first pilots for the recovery of valuable metals. So we hope to have news on that soon. That's very much a close synergy with some of our ion exchange technologies that we have. Then I mentioned the graphene membranes, where we plan to do commercial scale production for our wider sheets, and we're preparing pilots. And then obviously, very important, we're continuing to complete the projects, the 5 projects we now have under construction. Thank you for your attention. So Peter, any questions?
Well, we've got a good audience here today, which is very pleasing. And I note the Pitt Street research update today is also very pleasing to read. So if anybody wants that, please let me know. I can send it through. Willem, some of the questions here. Regionally, Australia represents 44% of the current business projects. Where do you see the growth opportunities, both geographically and technologically, that are most important to you?
Yeah, that's a good observation. You see us heavily geared towards mining in Australia. So the growth is very much coming also from the other regions and the other sectors. So while we focus on industrial brines are obviously not only in the mining or metal processing sector, but in a lot of other sectors. So we see a lot of potential growth in other regions. Partly we haven't been focused on it enough. Partly we will see that growth once we get our pilots or our large-scale demonstration up and running. So when our first Middle East project is working, we will see that. When our first China project is working, we will see the growth there. And then we're working towards Europe and the US. Because ultimately, these are very large markets that also are very open and I think in need of the more advanced solutions we're offering. So we're seriously sort of working towards that and even looking at perhaps establish a permanent presence in these markets, because that's often a requirement for customers.
With the water treatment with which of your water treatment technologies do you see as the most profitable versus operationally executed, and what opportunities do you see currently for those for that IP and technology?
Yeah, so I have a hard time answering that question exactly because of the reason I mentioned. You saw this strong distribution of technologies. So over the past years, we have had times that we were like, hey, maybe this technology we should put extra effort in because it's really the biggest growth driver. But interesting, right now, we see a very good spread. So if you would have asked me to pick 2, I would say both Bionex and Hyrox are currently the strongest demand, but it's really a very strong distribution across these technologies. And again, that's intentionally, and it's part of our strategy, and it also is, it links very much to customers, because sometimes we start to talk to a customer, say about a deselect solution, and then we find out that our high-work solution works better because they both work very good for brines, for example. So it is not a coincidence that we have this split. It's in fact something we set out to do in order to have a much better proposition to many of the customers we're talking to.
A question here coming through, which is around peers and the industry itself. How busy, how many long-term companies are operating, and is it a crowded space that you're working within?
I'm not sure if that's the first part of that question, but the second part I can answer. Generally, it's a crowded place. So in generally, there's a lot of water treatment companies, and you both have the smaller ones, so the local water treatment companies that tend not to provide very special technologies. They tend to use the more standard technologies or are more distributors of other technologies. And you have some of the bigger companies that also show up, especially for the larger project. So in that sense, it's a very crowded place, but it's a much less crowded place if you look at direct competitors to our technology. So most of the time, we're not so much competing with somebody else, although in a sort of theoretical sense we are, but it's much more about the customer being able and willing to look at us and say, okay, you're a new technology. Maybe there's no demonstration site in my neighborhood that I can look at, but the solution you provide and the economic benefits you provide are so large that I want to work with you. So that's still so in that sense, the competitive pressure is not our main concern at the moment. It's still usually the direct discussion with the customer, and especially if there's an engineering company in between, getting the engineering companies and the customer to recognize the benefits that we bring.
And a follow-on from that question, given your strong cash position and some good cash flows coming through the last quarters, is your growth to be purely organic, or do you see opportunities for bolt-ons or other acquisitions?
We're at that now, so I certainly think there will be opportunities for bolt-ons and partnerships. Also on the downstream, sort of the commercial side. So I think we have a very strong technology portfolio, right? So there might be certain technology we like to bolt on, but we're also very much looking at downstream partners. So commercial partners in some of the priority markets I mentioned, say Europe and the US, that could accelerate that growth by having a local presence. But nothing concrete at the moment, but it's certainly a path that we see as a potential growth accelerator in the future. Yes.
And probably one we'll finish up on, the momentum in companies complying with ESG requirements seems to be increasing. Do you see that as providing some immediate opportunities, and what can you see occurring more around companies needing to comply to more stringent ESG?
Yes, so it is in a way in the background creating more and more drive. So that's why it's very interesting. These last two we signed were very much driven by this. So I definitely think that's going to create additional momentum for our current portfolio, which is already largely geared towards lower energy costs, but also very much for our new membranes that also would reduce energy costs very substantially. And I think we as a company can still also do extra effort in providing a very clear proposition on our carbon and energy footprint, because that's a separate separate point for these days for some customers, that really end users in particular that really say we need to reduce our carbon footprint. And I think our technologies fit that trend very well.
All right, I think we have rounded up all the questions there today. If anybody has any more specific questions they'd like to put to Willem, please send them through to me at peter@nwrcommunications.com.au, and I'll see that he gets them. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in today, and thank you, Willem, for your time, and we look forward to hearing more soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.